Now we can move on to some other issues now. The new Patriotic Party's running mate for the 2016 elections, Dr. Bawumia, says the Mahama administration has disguised corruption as social intervention programs. He claims this is the main reason government is having to turn to the International Monetary Fund for a bailout. Delivering a lecture titled, "Will Your Anchor Hold at the Central University College?" the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Bawumia, says government's failure to punish corrupt elements continues to encourage others who expand their practices to other areas.
Only a commitment to fiscal discipline by government can guarantee it. Zero central bank financing is certainly new territory for Ghana. Will this government be disciplined enough in an election year to abide by zero financing from the central bank? Most analysts are rightly skeptical. Notwithstanding the bailout agreement with the IMF, on March 20th, just last week, Moody's downgraded Ghana's credit rating further into junk territory. We were downgraded from B2 to B3 with a negative outlook. This is 6 levels below investment grade and signifies high credit risk. Mr. Chairman, this means that investors are not yet convinced about the prospects for the economy, even with an IMF bailout. Investors are not convinced. Ghana would have to do a lot to convince the markets that it is committed to the program.
Now, he said government is desperately seeking a bailout because it has been unable to manage the ballooning and unsustainable debt portfolio.
How can government be seeking to contract this magnitude of non-concessional loans at this time when it does not have enough cash to meet statutory payments? This is like an alcoholic who has just been convinced to enter rehab and just a few days before rehab asks for a carton of whiskey. Can this person be trusted to keep or to stay with the rehab program? Undertaking this additional borrow would mean that the anchor is not likely to hold, and it would compromise the objective of fiscal consolidation and debt sustainability. Given Ghana's economic situation, this bailout program will require a commitment to fiscal discipline that will test the resolve of any government in any developing country, such as ours. And it is important that the government understands what it has signed up for. We should all be prepared for some painful adjustments.
Dr. Bawumia says government must be transparent with Ghanaians about the true conditions surrounding the bailout, as economic conditions are likely to get worse.
To give legal backing to the process of fiscal consolidation, the government is likely to be required by the IMF to pass a fiscal responsibility law. A fiscal responsibility law will require governments to declare and commit to a fiscal policy that can be monitored. It includes rules and provisions for transparency and sanctions. Mr. Chairman, in my lecture last year and earlier in November 2013, when I delivered the Aliu Mahama Memorial Lecture, I offered the same piece of advice to government, but the Minister of Finance responded that it was not necessary. Today, because it is the IMF offering the solution, the government response is that it is very necessary. Mr. Chairman, to prevent the runaway printing of money by the central bank to finance the large deficits of government, the IMF is requiring that Bank of Ghana reduces its lending to government to 0 by 2016. 0. This means that in 2016, Bank of Ghana would not be allowed to lend even a peso to the government. During my lecture last year, I offered similar advice. I cautioned that the printing of money was too much. The bank responded that it wasn't the case. But today the IMF is offering the same solution, and they agree with it. Bless you. As the IMF has stated, government would be required to remove all subsidies on utilities and petroleum products. This will require, obviously, will cause a lot of hardships. The removal of subsidies will also mean a strict implementation of the automatic price adjustment formula for utilities and petroleum. I would like to urge the government to publish all the elements of the automatic price formula so that we can all monitor.
Now, Dr. Bawumia also criticized government for failing to resolve the power crisis.
The IMF will not tell you how to resolve Dumsor. It will not tell you not to sign a 10-year emergency power agreement to deal with a 2-year problem. We've signed a 10-year agreement to deal with a 2-year problem. It will also not tell you to wait for 3 years of Dumsor before looking for an emergency solution. The government's approach to the delivery of emergency power from Turkey does not reflect the seriousness of the power situation. As I speak today, my understanding is that the Turkish power barges had not left Turkey as at last week. And so the promise that they will be here to deliver power in April is not likely to be met. The IMF cannot do this for us. We have to do it ourselves.
Right now, we can also take a closer look at this particular lecture. I have two of my colleagues here. To my far left is George Riafe, who is with the business desk, and to my immediate left is Evans Mensah with our political desk. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time here.
Yeah, thank you very much.
George, I'm going to start with you. What caught your attention at this lecture?
I thought it was the concern he raised about data and issues about the credibility, how these data are gathered. And you know that his argument is that since this program will be based on data or collective data that is presented to the fund, if there are questions about that data, then the program might also be found itself wanting. And for me, that was interesting. I mean, during the negotiations, we had these issues about concerns with data. But for me, I thought
But at this level of the negotiations, do we still have those concerns? Are those concerns still?
I still understand that the fund have some concerns with our data. But is it whether something that the Fiscal Service is working on it to ensure that they get an accurate figure? Because don't forget, the argument here is that any program that will be put in place would depend on the data given to the IMF. Let's take the argument about the growth of the country or the size of the economy in relation to revenue, in relation to expenditure. Don't forget, when you're computing the numbers and you speak about rising debt, in relation to what? A 10 billion debt in relation to economies and a size of a country that is worth maybe about $100 billion. That is insignificant. A 10 billion debt in relation to a size of economy maybe about 40 billion is relevant here. So in trying to get the answers or the solutions to our problem, the growth of our economy, the size of our economy, the inflation numbers are quite critical. And for me, I thought that we had gone past that stage. And for me, he bringing back those issues again was like, wow, this thing is still a problem.
Evans, what caught your attention?
What George said, but also some of the revelations he made, things that we didn't know before yesterday. One is the AFDB, the African Development Bank's sanctions on Ghana. The two is the $100 million he says we owe Nigeria gas. And the three is the fact that government had negotiated with the IMF to shift the conditionality that says that we need to sack some of the workers. They've shifted it into 2017, which means that whoever wins the 2016 elections will have to bear the responsibility of indeed implementing that very, controversial policy. So those three, for me, things I didn't know before yesterday, that's why they're interesting.
Indeed. Now, let's come back to the bit about the data. Then again, if we have fed the IMF with wrong data, wouldn't the IMF have known? Isn't it possible?
I understand that the fund is engaging people in the industry and all other sectors. The fund did raise this concern, and it wasn't something, and it's still a problem. But maybe the understanding was that we are working on it. Don't forget, when the Statistical Service puts out the data, we have, let me use the English terms here, we have the immediate, interim, and then final. So the figures are still being worked on. So in terms of even our size of our economy, for last year, the final figures are not out yet. We are still in the, they've gathered about 80% of the data or 70% of the data, so things would change.
And just on that, yesterday we heard from Dr. Tony Akutose, who is the chairman on the ranking member on the finance committee, say that when it comes to the specific issue of the food price index, the discrepancy between the statistical service figures and that of the agric ministry figures, it's not something that he believes specifically the IMF team would have picked up on. They would have picked up on the other issues with the, you know, the figures that generally will come with the economic indicators. But on this specific one about the food price that Dr. Bawumia harped on quite a lot, he doubted that has been the case, and for which reason he's suggesting that the IMF should pull the brakes on the negotiation, in the final approval, which is going to happen on the 3rd of April.
I mean, if the board should meet on 3rd of April,
you should pull the brakes on that and take a second look at this. That's an interesting proposition. We'll see how that goes.
Why would a government, are there any political gains to it when a government decides to feed wrong data?
Just a quick one. I mean, I think that whether it's deliberate, the arguments about data being massaged, the arguments, there is problem with the gathering of data in this country, and it's a fact. And some might argue that rather we have to work on strengthening these institutions, the Bank of Ghana and the Statistical Service. Yeah, sharp brains there, hard-working guys there. But if there is a problem with when they go out on the market, do we have the structure? I mean, you go to other developed economies and they can tell you even the number of people who've come into the economy today and their contribution. When I go into UK, when I'm captured, they know even the level of my expenditure and all those things. So all those things are fed into those numbers. Don't forget that the service do projections and extrapolations. So I look at the numbers and say, okay, all other things being equal, if it's your disposable income, you're going to spend X, A, Z, so I can project that this is your level of income and this is what you're going to spend. And I factor that into the basket. So there are problems with how we get that raw data and work on it. So maybe in the process of working on that data, then these problems come out. Because if I go to a company and I tell you, give me a projection of how much you're paying AB. So I'm just trying to make a point that
the argument seems to suggest, though, that the data not being correct or accurate is done deliberately to paint a picture we're better than we are.
I can maybe back here, but I'm just saying that for what I know that there are problems in picking the raw data.
But does any government gain from doing that?
Well, if you have food prices dropping at a time when we have serious economic challenges, prices of fuel had gone up, prices of spare parts have gone up, prices of everything else that goes into the carting of the food from the farms to Accra, which should any common sense should tell you that those factors should lead to an increase in the food prices. Yet, the Ghana Statistical Service tells you that in spite of all these challenges, food prices are actually dropping. That's what Bawumia's point is. That will suit a government. I mean, whether it's done deliberately or not, I can't say. But if the statistics from your most trusted source says, well, the food prices are actually dropping, some in the negatives, in spite of all the economic difficulties that we have. Of course, if you're a government, you want to believe that. But if you're in opposition, you say, come on, how is that true? When I go to the market, I'm seeing the reality on the ground, and something is wrong there. But the point to note, though, that George said, is that it has been pointed out before, way before Bawumia even ever suggested that there's a problem with the Statistical Service. The SEPA, Center for Policy Alternatives, in 2002 said this about the Statistical Service figures. It says, the credibility and reliability of the inflation statistics produced by GSS, which by the way is the Ghana Statistical Service, have also been publicly challenged. Now, an examination by SEPA, headed by Joabi, very reputable economist, of the matter, pointed to problems of data collection and processing. In other words, the guys at Statistical Service are having problems with processing the data and collecting it, which reason we are arriving at some of these faulty conclusions.
And let me just go over the telephone and speak with Dr. Eric Osei-Sibe, Senior Lecturer at the Economics Department of the University of Ghana. Well, I understand I also have Dr. John Gachi, who is Senior Lecturer at the University of Cape Coast Business School. You're welcome to the program, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Dr. Sibe, I'm going to start with you. For you, at this lecture, what stood out?
Hello?
Osei-Sibe?
Yes, I didn't hear you.
What stood out for you at the lecture?
Well, many things. I didn't actually listen, but I've taken pain to read the full text, and I think it was quite insightful and very revealing, to say the least. And essentially, I think it reaffirms and re-emphasizes many of the things that other development partners and other research institutions have said. What IEA have said, what even the IMF have said, what the World Bank and the credit agencies have said similar things in the past. The issue of large fiscal deficit is not new to us. I mean, we've said that since 2012. The issue of mounting debt has been said several times by many research institutes and civil society. Even the Century Report reiterated many of these points. The issue of high interest rates have been said severally, as well as even the quality of the data set that we use in reaching some of these targets, and the analysis has all been questioned or mentioned in reports.
Indeed. So the bit of the data is what we're discussing at this point. Now, if indeed what Dr. Bawumia said is anything to go by, then it means that we may not get the desired results we hope to achieve with the IMF bailout. Where do you sit on that?
Well, it may or it may not be the case. Because if you look at even our negotiations with the IMF, I think one key factor that dragged the negotiations was the issue of the credibility of data sets. You know, the IMF has to come in and out, back and forth, because they were actually finding some inconsistencies with the data that government was presenting to them. And what the IMF team sought to do was to ensure that whatever data that they were working with was credible and can be relied upon to make proper projections for the future. So, good, there were problems with the data set, but by and large, I think now the methodology or some of the ways that the data gathering or how the data was being gathered has actually changed a little bit. If you can remember, you know, the GDP for 2014 has been revised more than 3 times already. When the finance minister read the budget in 2015, it actually, for 2014 in November, it actually projected that the country was going to grow by 6.9 or so %. It came to about 7, then it reduced to 4.5, and then finally it came to about 4.2%. So which means that there's something fundamentally wrong with the way we collect data sets in this country, and which has to be looked, because we have to be consistent. We have to be consistent. Well, and yeah, hello.
Dr. Osei-Sibe, I'm going to have you hold the line. Dr. Gachi?
Hello.
Can we look forward to a problem-specific solution from the IMF based on the data we have given them so far?
I don't get your question. If you can rephrase it.
For instance, Dr. Bawumia has mentioned the fact that we may have given the IMF make-believe data, and we should expect make-believe results as well. My question now is that what we're looking forward to as a Ghanaian people, or what we're getting from the IMF could be problem-specific?
Well, I think we all do agree that there is problem with data collection in the country, not only in terms of GDP or inflation, even capital inflow into the country and capital outflow out of the country. Even basic economic activity by people in the country. We do not have adequate data on these things. So this is something we should treat as a national issue that we should focus our attention to deal with. I also do understand that there was some disagreement about data. When that happens, what you do is to engage in data cleaning and alignment. I believe the point that the IMF has reached with the country means that they have gone through that process, and that led to a lot of revision, and to a large extent, they are satisfied with what has happened. What it means is that we need to strengthen our institutions who are in charge of gathering important economic data for the country. That is something that we should treat as a national issue. The only challenge is that if you listen to the lecture, it seems as if it was deliberate. So if you want to make it that it's a deliberate attempt to do so, then you need to provide all that information. And also, when you listen to the lecture, it is a kind of comparative kind of thing. So one would have agreed with Dr. Bawumia that it is deliberate if he had put in place the previous years that he talked about, especially 2001 to 2008. Let us see how data was being reported. If that problem was not there, it was reported in a different manner as against what is happening here, then we can conclude that it is deliberate. But we must admit that we have general problem with data collection, data processing, and data management in the country, which we need to work on.
Indeed.
It is as a result of that when we are even discussing economic issues, we do not even factor the effect of population in our drive to proper economic management. When we talk about countries like Norway, Denmark, etc., we forget that over the past 10 years, their population has tilted upwards very insignificantly. So it's because of this issue of data management and processes in the country. So I think that we need to treat it as a national issue.
Very well. Dr. Gashin, I'm going to have you hold the line at this point. Now, what stood out for me was the fact that the Bank of Ghana will not be able to lend to government from 2016 or by 2016. The IMF, as part of the conditionalities, is expecting a zero borrowing from the central bank.
I think that it happens that the Bank of Ghana is required to lend. They lend to government to finance its operations, but you don't lend more than 10% of the previous year's revenue to government. What we have picked up, or what sometimes is going around, is that the Bank of Ghana is lending more than that 10% requirement, and that is where the concerns are being raised here, that we going forward or going into this program, the Bank of Ghana has to be an independent institution. Therefore, the practice where the Bank of Ghana lends more than 10% of the previous year's revenue should end totally.
I think for me, what caught my attention, I know about the 10%, but when he mentioned zero borrowing from the Bank of Ghana, he also made mention, and Evans, she could come in here, he made mention of the fact that election 2016 is just around the corner. How will government be able to do this without necessarily having to go to the Bank of Ghana for funds?
They have to, because there are consequences. Because once you pen that signature to the IMF document, you're saying that you're going to stick to that financial discipline, whatever the cost. And for me, I look at it in a positive sense, because going to an election, we've seen over the years, an election year we overspend, and then the next 3 years we try now to try to stabilize. But now that it's coming at the time we are going to an election year, what it means is that the government must comply, not going, and see, the Bank of Ghana have been overexposed to the government. They're giving too much money to the government. Because of that, our credibility, we've been downgraded.
Yeah, by
Moody's. By Moody's.
Yeah.
It's all because of that. You know, when you are downgraded, what it means is that borrowing becomes more expensive.
Cost of the borrowing is going to shoot up.
So they need to stick to this. And for us, for me as a taxpayer, I'm happy, because you sign that document and IMF giving you their money, you have to stick to the rules, which means that you cannot overspend next year. So for once, we can expect that the government if they have to win elections, they have to find money elsewhere, not my taxpayers' money in the consolidated fund.
Do you see that happening? I mean, those are the conditionalities, yes. But
it has to happen. It's not like an internal agency telling government or parliament saying don't overspend. This is the IMF. They are giving you their money.
You're taking their money.
They should go and ask what happened in Greece. You can agitate and protest all you want. You have to bite the bullet. It's as simple as that.
Now the odds are against us. Donor partners, offshore investors and all the rest are saying that we have a problem with your economy. We have issues, concerns about uncertainty. You know, we don't know what, we can't even plan for the next 6 months. Credibility issues. We don't even believe what your managers are saying again. So we have to do something. And we can't get the situation where the IMF has to reprimand us.
Government will raise the money it needs
to run their elections.
to run the election. But let me go.
Elections is a party thing. They should find it somewhere else.
Let me go over to the phone line and speak with Dr. Selby. Doc, how do you see government operating under the zero borrowing from the central bank territory?
Well, I think it's really going to be a challenge for government because over the years we've seen that the central bank often comes in to finance government deficit to a large extent. The whole thing has been a 10% of previous.
Hello, Doc. I think we lost Dr. Selby. Let me just find out if Dr. John Gachi is over the phone. Hello, Dr. Gachi.
Hello.
Dr. Gachi, just react to the same question. How do you see government operating in the zero borrowing territory?
Well, I think all these things are coming because of what we refer to as a fiscal dominance, where because our fiscal situation is not the best, revenue mobilization is not matching with expenditure. So government has to engage in excessive borrowing and passing that borrowing through the central bank. That will pressure on monetary policy management in the country. So in order to restore that monetary policy management to enhance economic health of the economy, these things are very, very important. But I must indicate that the central bank has specific acts that guide its operation. The fact that we are going with the IMF does not mean that the act will be written off. The act clearly indicates that you cannot lend to government beyond 10%, and that will be respected. As to whether
irrespective of the conditionality from the IMF?
The IMF will ensure that that is respected. But as to whether there is indeed going to be zero borrowing, I doubt if that will really happen. But I know that the IMF will ensure that the Bank of Ghana complies with the policy framework that guides its operation. Right now, we all do know that they have been operating outside that bound. So they will be on their toes to ensure that within reasonable zone that will be acceptable to the two parties.
Very well. I'm grateful for your time, Dr. Gachi. Dr. John Gachi is with the University of Cape Coast Business School. Now, Communications Minister Dr. Amane Bawumia has been reacting to some statements in this particular lecture delivered by the NPP's running mate for the 2016 election, Dr. Bawumia. Take a look at this and then we'll come back to our conversation here in the studio.
Minister Setepe has said that moving forward, and it has started, when these facilities are guaranteed, you have to sign an on-lending agreement between the Ministry of Finance and the respective agency so that the revenue that will accrue can be used to service the debt. The next level also has to do with the Ghana Infrastructure and Investment Fund. This is obviously a departure from what we have experienced in the past. Again, the finance minister has spoken time and time again, and he is implementing it, and monitor the loans that are going to Parliament. One, the rate at which loans were being sent to Parliament has reduced, and in fact, it will even reduce further. That is one. Two, the nature of the loans in terms of non-concessional borrowing will either reduce to a zero or to the barest minimum. What it also means is that even if out of necessity you are going for a facility, you are not going for the kind of facility that will impose burdens such as a Eurobond facility will impose on you. He then comes to deal with the finance minister's announcement of a possible Eurobond facility this year. What he doesn't talk about is the fact that the Eurobond contracted in 2007, not under this administration, must be retired in 2017. And as a result of debt restructuring and the management and all that, part of these bonds are also used to service it.
Well, I'm still here with Evans Mensah from our political desk and George Riafe from our business desk. Now, George, you explained to me earlier how... You explained to me earlier how the zero borrowing could take effect. Tell us more.
I think it's all about what they call the fiscal prudence and ensuring that, okay, spend within your limit. So there's a tendency that because we can borrow from the Bank of Ghana anytime, you know, you have a mom, you have a sister, anytime you're in crisis and you walk to her, I need money, you get it quick, you're bound to spend anyhow. So the plan is that gradually you cut down that expenditure, you cut down that opportunity that exists for you. So the fund is saying that going forward, we need to scale down the percentage that government can borrow from the fund. So, and that could go a long way to check that excess expenditure, because if you know that there's someone you can turn to borrow, why wouldn't you overspend? It has implications in our quest to manage the rising levels of goods and services, because if you go to the bank to borrow, and if they don't have money, what do? They might be forced to print more money and pump it into the economy. And what would you have? Inflation.
Indeed. And then for you, Evans, you mentioned earlier that retrenchment stood out for you. What about it?
I mean, the fact that it's government, well, according to Dr. Bawumia, has managed to negotiate the implementation date to 2017. In other words, when we signed, when this is approved in April, on April 3rd, all the other conditionalities might kick in, but with the exception of the firing of workers, which is quite instructive because that is politically very damaging. If they imagine they start implementing the sacking of workers rationalization this year and go into an election year next year, workers will be agitating, and that is going to cost them some votes possibly. But if you look at the implications politically also for both Dr. Bawumia and his party and the NDC, something interesting has happened over the years since Dr. Bawumia started giving these lectures. He has been proven right in some of the things he said, and the government's initial reaction to him had, in the long run, turned out to be false. For example, listen to this. Dr. Bawumia said this on the 25th March 2014, way before we even thought about going to the IMF. He said, I would like to repeat without exaggeration that the Ghanaian economy is in crisis. It is time for serious action. If government does not take the right decisions and soon, then Ghana will likely have to approach the IMF for a bailout, and this is the part that fascinates me, before the end of the year. And before the end of the year, when he said this, the president was essentially saying, we are not going to the IMF for any bailout. The finance minister said the same thing, right? Before the end of the year, to be specific, I think in September, we had gone to the IMF. Yes, we had gone to the IMF. What does that mean? Government has given Dr. Bawumia credibility over a period of time.
Indeed.
That some of the things he predicts come to pass. Credibility and trust can turn into votes for you in 2016, because people come to you and say, this is a man who has shown a track record. He had challenged government and predicted things that government said won't happen, that happened, and he can bang on that for votes. What will happen to government? simply will say you can't be trusted because you say it won't happen, yet it happens. That can detract in terms of votes. So for Dr. Bawumia, it's good for him. And don't forget, he is the running mate to Nanado Dankwa Akufo-Addo.
Indeed.
But that, just a quick one. It was interesting. Yesterday in the evening, or deep in the night, I was speaking to a professor, an economics professor. And he also made a point that elections are not won in the universities. He made a critical point that, well, if the MPP wants to win, it's not the lecture that will win the vote.
But you have to change minds before they get to
credibility,
the boxes.
credibility is critical here.
And I agree because yesterday I was trying to find out from the party bigwigs, how are they planning to capitalize on what Dr. Bawumia had done over the years? Are they, for example, pointing what I just said out, that, listen, the guy had predicted it, government said it don't happen, and yet it happened? Is that a deliberate plan to capitalize on this and make political capital? I'm just going to leave it, and hopefully people might find it and, you know, make
and
some.
If
they don't do that, they might not
make
make much of this.
We'll leave our conversation here for now. Thank you very much, guys. Evans Mensah is with the political desk. George Riafe is with the business desk. There's more to come here. Don't go away.